They called Novarosis the most secure harbor on the eastern coast. 8 missile tubes, radar-guided guns, and a full drone squadron watching every angle. Yet, one morning, everything went silent. No air raid, no ships in range, just smoke rising from the pier. How can a nation with almost no navy erase a billion-dollar target without firing a single conventional missile? You're about to see how the warship era stumbled into its greatest weakness, one invisible algorithm at a time. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. They called it unbreakable. The port of Novarosis sat behind a wall of hardware that looked more like a military exhibition than a harbor. Along the coast stood rows of missile batteries, each one locked into a grid so tight it tracked every wave that dared approach. The defenders believed nothing under the sky could get through. The Panzer S-1 launchers were their pride, firing in rapid sequence with pinpoint radar control. Next to them stood the AK-630 cannons, compact towers capable of spraying 10,000 rounds per minute. Above it all, Orion drones drifted lazily in the daylight, their cameras sweeping the horizon for any trace of movement. Together, they created a picture of strength that seemed absolute. A billion-dollar frigate anchored at the center, polished and still, surrounded by electronic guardians that scanned the seas like restless eyes. The Fortress was built for conventional war. Every weapon was designed to fight the kind of navy that sends metal hulls and jet squadrons into battle. The warship carried 8 vertical missile tubes, filled with Pukakong 3 ballistic missiles, each capable of hitting a target from 800 miles away. Engineers had built the pier as an extension of the ship's armor, weaving sensors into the concrete, so even a floating piece of debris would trigger scrutiny. The radar software mapped the sea every second, painting outlines of passing gulls and fishing boats in glowing green. The harbor's confidence came from this technology. It had never been tested under pressure, but every simulation told them the same thing. Nothing small, cheap, or homemade could touch it. Then the imbalance appeared. Ukraine arrived not with ships, not even with warplanes, but with objects that barely looked military. Simple hulls, built in backyards and garages, coated with matte paint to mute reflections. Their fleet moved beneath the line of sight, flying low or cutting through the surf at unpredictable speeds. Some were no larger than a car, others were wooden boats carrying small warheads sealed with foam and duct tape. Against a fortress worth billions, these seemed like toys. But they had one trait that the defenders didn't account for: independence. Once launched, they didn't wait for orders. The code told them how to find a pulse in the enemy's radar field and slither into it. On September 24th, the operators in the Coastal Command Hub watched their screens with routine boredom. Filtered radar feeds painted a perfect calm, an ocean stripped of all traces of threat. Then anomalies began. Tiny distortions blinking between formal targets. The Panzer systems spun to recalibrate, convinced it was sea clutter. The AK-630S rotated their barrels toward nothing and back again. Inside the harbor, the frigate's sensors looped at full range, feeding data into overlapping command chains. They called this network invincible. It wasn't. Beneath the signal noise, dozens of drones crept forward under the radar ceiling, weaving through the spaces the algorithms ignored. They thought they were out of reach. They were wrong. That line would later echo through encrypted channels as engineers reviewed the footage. The lesson wasn't in the explosion that followed, but in what allowed it to happen. The Ukrainians had struck not with visible power, but with software that learned, calculated, and adapted faster than a human controller ever could. The real weapon was invisible. It lived inside machine logic and manipulated the very systems meant to stop it. In that moment, reach itself became a myth. Defense turned fragile when faced with creativity. Speed, angle, and algorithm replaced brute force. The harbor built to repel empires fell victim to code written on laptops. What kind of secret platform could blind billion-dollar defenses in seconds? How do you strike a warship without ever being seen? The answer begins deep within a silent network of code written for a new kind of fight. Ukraine's architects had built a battlefield no longer shaped by steel and fuel, but by learning machines that could react faster than any pilot or gun crew. At the center of this system was a trio of new platforms. The Scythe UAVs operated in the air, small, quick, and engineered to fly just above the sea's glare. Below them, the Mura Phi 5 vessels moved in coordinated formations, carrying compact payloads beneath radar coverage. And linking them all was something less visible, a hidden US-backed node designed for deep-sea blind spots. It sent no detectable signals, but synchronized multiple strike avenues through encrypted timing pulses. This was the first time such a platform operated in real warfare, and its purpose was quiet control, not raw power. The defenders never saw the switch. As the drones and vessels advanced, the North Korean frigate activated its Kasuga 4 EMP system, unleashing a pulse within 186-mile radius. It was meant to turn every drone into a dead object within seconds. Control screens across the Ukrainian command centers flashed warnings, then dissolved into static. Data feeds went dark. For 10 long seconds, it looked as if the assault had collapsed. Yet inside each Scythe UAV, an American-made AI had already prepared for this. The drones switched automatically to inertial guidance, using internal gyroscopes and preloaded terrain memory to complete their route. They didn't need signal or command now, they were operating entirely on logic and prediction. From the coastal defense radars, chaos unfolded. Operators watched with confusion as dozens of new echoes appeared across the screen. Ghost signals forming patterns that made no sense. The EMP had distorted both sides' data, but Ukraine's swarm had anticipated that interference and used it. The Mura decoy boat began broadcasting a false signature, pretending to be a friendly patrol craft. Defensive missiles locked onto it instantly. Moments later, a 357E6E missile hit the decoy and created a fireball large enough to blind the thermal sensors around the pier. The real Mura boats, carrying 700-pound charges, slid through the radar gap underneath. By the time defenders realized what was happening, the swarm had split, half targeting the frigate's missile tubes, the rest circling toward its fuel depot. Inside the North Korean flagship, counterfire systems spun through automatic sequences, trying to acquire targets among the static, but the radar identified the attackers as biological clutter. To the computer, the drones looked like flocks of birds. Visual confirmation was useless. The smoke from the decoy's explosion had turned the entire pier into haze. The ship's gunners fired at shapes they could not confirm, burning through ammunition while the real threats closed in. The AI decision loops inside the Ukrainian drones recalculated trajectories in milliseconds, rerouting around gunfire arcs and adjusting altitude by inches. Each move was faster than a human reflex, computing thousands of probabilities in real time. The strike that followed was surgical. Two Scythes locked their laser designators on the vertical launch tubes, while one Mura boat positioned beneath the stern. The shaped charges pierced through the steel plating and ignited the fuel stores, paralyzing the frigate's weapons without sinking it. The defenders stared at screens filled with static as alarms flooded the deck. The fortress they'd believed untouchable was blind, its billion-dollar sensors fooled by a swarm built for less than a fraction of its cost. The secret platform off the coast coordinated this entire assault without exposing a single transmission. Its silence was its armor. Ukraine had attacked with small disposable machines, not out of desperation, but choice. Lightweight systems exposed the flaws that heavy warships couldn't even detect. Cheap became precise, and intelligence replaced bulk. When the explosion ended and the sea calmed again, the sound that followed wasn't triumph. It was the silence that comes when power shifts from firepower to the code that controls it. The strike at Novarosis became more than an act of destruction. It revealed that intelligence, not firepower, now decides who holds the upper hand. When lines of code can outthink billion-dollar vessels, old definitions of strength lose meaning. The warning was clear. The balance of naval power had shifted from armor to algorithm. Yet that shift brings a deeper question. If small autonomous weapons can dismantle megastructures, what prevents every side from building more? The battlefield now extends into diplomacy, where restraint must evolve as quickly as technology. Should this next generation deter conflict, or redefine how peace is maintained.